I knew this would make me crash out again. No! Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Hello everyone, it's Emma and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all sorts of things zero waste, focusing on free, easy, and fun ways to live low waste and ways that we can all be activists, to include calling out climate misinformation where we can. If I talk a little bit too fast for you, there's a gear icon right down here where you can change the speed of the video. And yes, today is part 2 of reacting to a very prominent climate denier right now. It is important to talk about her because she was part of the climate movement up until 2021, ex-climate activist, because I really don't understand how you can go from grasping that climate change is human caused and grasping that fossil fuels are the thing that are literally killing us, to thinking that climate change is fake, climate change is not man-made, and fossil fuels are good. Again, if you want to check out the first video of me reacting to her, check it out right here. Let's go ahead and get into it so I can cover as many of her videos as I can in as short of a time as I possibly can. Before we get into it, the lore has thickened. One of her videos, unfortunately, came up on my For You page a couple weeks ago, to which I commented on it, asking her a question to cite her sources, essentially, because she loves to just throw stuff out there without citing her sources. And so she actually replied to me, she actually DM'd me, and she followed me, which is especially weird because I'm precisely the climate activist that she hates, in that I'm very anti-capitalism, I'm very anti-colonialism. I want to leave her anonymous because I don't think she deserves any more clout than she's already chasing. When I looked at Instagram, a lot of my mutuals still followed her from back in her climate days, so perhaps you still follow her as well, and maybe you should quit following her. Her name is Lucy Biggers. Her misinformation is causing people to follow her because people are stuck in this echo chamber. They're hearing precisely what they want to hear. They are not open to changing their minds. They are not open to trusting science, which is the literal only fact that we have in the entire world. I think we left off on day 20 of her series, which is kind of like day X of talking about why I'm an ex-climate activist. So let's start with day 21 and bust these myths.
So today I wanted to share just sort of a silly anecdote and story of my time when I was in the climate movement, so you can really understand how my mindset was so emotional and not fact-based.
Kind of sick of this because I was emotional, because I didn't grasp the facts, because I didn't understand something. The entire movement is a scam.
After Trump got elected in 2016, I was so upset. As a protest, went vegetarian for 6 months.
That's it. That's that's the entire video for day 1. No explanation, no connection as to why that makes the climate movement a scam. Going vegetarian because Trump got elected as president is a weird thing to do. I also don't see the connection why you would do that. But like, going vegetarian is better for the planet. Being anti-Trump is pro-planet. 22.
Day 22 of explaining why as a former climate activist, I now think the climate movement is a scam. I think a big player in this climate movement alarmism that is what I'm so against is the media.
I might actually agree with this one, but that is such a valid point. Media companies need to use clickbait to get us to read their articles. But I personally agree with the fact that the media can totally blow things out of proportion and promote climate doomism. Every single one of these videos is not actually targeting the climate movement. She thinks the climate movement is a scam, so the media companies who just need a clickable headline, they're the reason that the climate movement is a scam even though they're not part of the climate movement. Like, look at the title of any scientific paper. Look at the title of any, those are not based in doom. And what really bothers me about her is she is so disconnected from the modern climate movement. She left over 4 years ago, and she's just really stuck in that mindset, like, that's how it was 4.5 years ago. That's how it always is.
And the media just sort of repeats what it hears. Like, we have this mistake that, like, everyone in these newsrooms is, like, so smart and knows what they're talking about. And that's not true. Like, I worked in a newsroom for many, many years.
I see what she's saying here, but also I feel like that's kind of like a jab to herself. You assume that everybody who works in news is smart. Her sentence is gonna go on. I paused it. But I used to work in news.
Never questioned anything. I never went deeper.
Oh, this is your own problem. Because I didn't go deeper, because I didn't ask questions, because I didn't seek out the facts. The climate movement is a scam. Girl, that's on you to formulate your own opinions based off of the facts. That is on you to ask questions if something feels amiss. This perfectly explains how she went from being a climate activist to being red-pilled and is now on the alt-right pipeline. Again, this is just speculation based off of other things that she has said that are very MAGA coded, but it explains that perfectly because she just admitted she doesn't ask questions. And she probably over the years has started to, just shift her worldview and just whatever aligns with her beliefs, and this is exactly who the people are in her comments as well. If someone is saying precisely what you believe and you're just in this echo chamber and somebody is affirming how you feel, you're just gonna take that as fact.
And even like at my old news company, I played a part in changing our editorial standards to saying the word climate crisis instead of climate change every time we reported on an issue that had to do with climate change. And so I was an activist in a newsroom for this cause, and I never really looked into the science beyond looking at other headlines that were also like, and the takeaway was we have 10 years to reverse climate change or whatever, like questioning it. And then I spewed it back out to our audience. And I think that's how we get this media system that's so distrusted now, because it's a lot of 20-somethings who frankly don't know what they're doing.
This is a very common MAGA talking point too. Young people are dumb, and she says that a lot.
And so they just spin out a narrative, and I see this now with how we have headlines tie every extreme weather event to climate change.
Because it's scientifically proven.
Any responsible climate scientist will tell you, you can't like tie a specific extreme weather.
I mean, yeah, I think that is valid. Like, one individual event you can't say was related to climate change every time. You can sometimes. For example, if climate change is causing a drought and the drought is causing the land to dry out and then a wildfire starts there, very likely climate change induced. Obviously, you can't say that with 100% fact, but you can say that with probably 99% confidence. It is scientifically proven. More extreme weather events are on the rise due to climate change. More fires, more floods, more rain. Because the thing about climate change, it's not just temperature, it is changing the entire climate.
When I was working in a newsroom, wanted the climate scientists to tie like a specific hurricane or specific fire to climate change. It would like pressure them to
Who's pressuring the scientists to do that? Somebody commented this on one of her other videos, like, have you actually talked to a scientist? I don't think she has a single idea what science is. Rather, how science works. My chemistry professor just said this the other day, like, science is seeking out the truth. That is precisely what science is. A scientist isn't just gonna say, that weather event is tied to climate change because that's what I feel. This is what's so funny about MAGA too, is their big phrase right now is, facts over feelings, then trust the science. Science is like the only fact we have in the world. And listen, if there was a climate scientist out there who was being pressured to classify this weather event as climate change related even though it wasn't, they need to be fired. But again, like, that one outlier is not a reason to distrust the entire climate movement, even if this is true. I doubt this is true.
But I thought I was on the right side of history because I was saying, this is a crisis, we need to start reporting on it now.
So let's go.
I think about the climate movement, one thing that always comes to my mind in expression is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And this happens with these policies that the climate movement thinks are well-meaning, and they lead to worse problems. Specifically, the war on meat has created...
There's no war on meat.
Dutch farmers are having to close their, generations-old farms because of climate pollution.
And again, she never cites any sources.
These farms are creating too much nitrogen, which is, the cow's poop. Too much pollution, so these farmers have to close their farms. If you close farms in the Netherlands, which I'm guaranteeing you have better practices on historically grazed land, then where is that meat going to come from? It's going to come from places in Brazil that are deforesting rainforests so that cows can graze.
Because there's no sources, I can only interpret what I know historically and currently, in that I highly doubt that every single farm in the Netherlands is closing. In fact, they might not even be closing, they might just be changing their practices. Let's move on.
I would say that climate change, formerly known as global warming, really came into the public mind with Inconvenient Truth. And the poster had an image of a hurricane, right, over an exhaust pipe from...
There's the movie poster. Hopefully you can see that.
The takeaway from that was, oh my gosh, climate change is creating all these superstorms, right?
I'm gonna look up the synopsis of this film and see if she's even accurate. A 2006 American documentary film directed by whoever presents an illustrated talk on climate change by Al Gore, aimed at alerting the public to an increased planetary emergency due to global warming, which is what it was called in 2006. It is a documentary version of a memoir about Al Gore and why he became a climate activist. I knew she didn't actually watch this film. She saw what the cover was and made a stupid interpretation. She didn't even look at the synopsis. This is exhausting, and this is how I felt last time too. It's just exhausting at how wrong these people are. Desperate they are to spread propaganda to make money. That's it. That is just so gross and borderline evil. Okay, let's see if she has anything valuable to say about this.
A takeaway from that was, oh my gosh, climate change is creating all these superstorms, right? We're going to live in a world where every hurricane season is going to be the worst thing you've ever seen.
That is factually accurate. It gets worse every year.
And the fact of the matter is, it's been 25 years, and the science around
This film came out in 2006. It's been 19 years.
hurricanes and climate change has totally not played out the way that climate scientists predicted it back in the early 2000s.
Such a misunderstanding of what science is. She says the word prediction, like, does she also just not know what the definition of prediction is? It's not going to work out play by play. These are not fortune tellers who know precisely how the future is going to unfold. They're making predictions based off of calculations and facts in the past, or using the past to analyze the future. This is such a common argument for climate deniers, because the science that they predicted 20, 30, 40 years ago didn't play out precisely how they predicted it. it's wrong. Guess what? They're making new predictions every year, every day even. And also guess what? We have made strides since the early 2000s to curb climate change as much as we can, which has helped, if in the early 2000s they predicted hurricanes to increase like this, we have done a little bit of an effort to curb pollution. Now the prediction might be like this, and it might be different based off of the predictions they made 20 years ago, because we are improving. We are making the planet more habitable. We were before Trump. And also, again, it was a prediction. Predictions are rather accurate, but that doesn't mean it's perfect.
I'm going to reference the work of Alex Epstein, who has already put this all together. Hurricanes making landfall right now every year, it's been steady for the last few decades.
What do you mean it's been steady? There's like a really big spike in 2005. And again, it's even underlined right here. I don't know if she underlined it or if the initial creator of the graph underlined it. Underlined major hurricanes. And it only goes through 2017. It's missing 8.5, it's almost missing 9 years of data.
No crazy upward spike like this you can see on this chart that I'm putting over my head.
There are, though. There is a huge spike. If you also remember in 2017, that was when the hurricane 2 or 3, I think, hit Puerto Rico, Florida, and Texas within a month. And then also pretty big spikes in, what is that?
Landfalls have been the same.
I can't tell the year because her captions are over it.
Again, this goes totally against what the climate movement says. We are safer than ever from hurricanes because we have modern infrastructure.
Our hurricane infrastructure in the US is pretty subpar. Have we improved since Hurricane Katrina? No. I just watched a really good National Geographic documentary about Hurricane Katrina. Even in Louisiana, they're not prepared for another hurricane of that magnitude. And also, this is anecdotal, but when I lived in Japan, we went through typhoons, which is just the word. It's the same thing. It is a cyclone in the ocean. The difference is a typhoon happens in the eastern hemisphere and a hurricane happens in the western hemisphere. So we went through what would be the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane. We did not evacuate. We didn't even lose power. Not a single window broke. And the point of me saying this is Japan's infrastructure is truly built to withstand disasters like that. And in the United States, it's not. We do have the technology to have good hurricane infrastructure and be safer from these storms that are increasing from climate change.
We all have gas-powered cars, which allow us to get out if there's a storm.
Can an EV not get you out of a storm zone? Is that what she's saying? Is that the only thing that can evacuate you from a storm?
And so this chart shows how...
Ugh! This is an extremely frustrating comparison of graphs of using correlation instead of causation.
The deaths from hurricanes and the dangers of hurricanes have completely gone.
No! I have just never seen such a blatant disregard for truth, I guess?
Basically to nothing in countries that have access to cheap, abundant energy like America and Europe.
That is an insane take. Our first chart is atmospheric CO2, which has gone up since 1920. Our second chart is climate-related deaths. Keep in mind, she specifically said hurricanes, which is wrong. This is climate disaster-related deaths, and that has gone down drastically since the 1920s. Why would this be? It's not because of fossil fuels. It could be simply because we have better access to emergency services. Yeah, we do have cars instead of a horse and buggy that we would have had in the 1920s, which can help us get out of areas faster. We also just simply know more about forest fires. We know more about hurricanes, we know more about floods, to build our houses better, to evacuate sooner. This also has to do with predictions. Things like NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. This also has everything to do with the National Weather Service. These things are being defunded. These entities that have gotten so good at predicting extreme weather events that they can get people out before they even happen, right? You can predict a hurricane is coming days in advance. So simply we just know days in advance, hey, a hurricane's coming, I'm gonna go leave for a couple days. And that prevents deaths. There are so many other reasons why our climate change related deaths have gone down, and it's not thanks to fossil fuels. And again, so many environmentalists can recognize that, yes, my gasoline powered car can absolutely get me out of here in an emergency, and I'm grateful for that. That does not mean fossil fuels are good.
Every hurricane season, when they start, we always inevitably see the headlines that's the superstorm era is upon us, the climate change, nightmare scenario. But the science does not bear this out. If you go into the fine print, again, I'm referencing Alex, he's pulled all.
So this is a valid point. And this author, Alex Epstein, says that it can be difficult actually to see how hurricanes may have trended up, may have trended none, or may have trended down, simply because we don't have good satellite data of hurricanes before satellite was invented. And that's a totally valid argument. We don't know a whole lot about the past because we just have better records these days.
They say there's no pattern right now that climate change is leading to more hurricanes. or making them worse or even anywhere near what we thought. Why is the media every hurricane season?
It all comes back to the media. I don't understand how she has such a disconnect. The media is blowing stuff out of proportion, therefore the climate movement is a scam. Because the headlines, who have nothing to do with climate science, who have nothing to do with environmentalism, and everything to do with making a catchy headline that will get them clicks, that will get them money, that makes the climate movement a scam. Let's move on though.
Was the manipulation of charts. And I'm going to go to Alex Epstein's work again because he really showed this to me. We're all familiar with this chart, which is showing global temperature rise over time. But you have to look at the y-axis. And right here, this y-axis is just 1 degree Celsius.
Let me see what she has to say before I say anything.
Increase looks so dramatic and it's very fear-inducing. And for years, I would look at that chart and it would freak me out.
If you don't understand how to read a chart, that's your own fault. Not everybody's trained in reading charts. Again, if you're worried, if you're scared, having climate anxiety does not make the climate movement a scam, first off. And if the chart that you're reading scares you, maybe look up how to read a chart, because maybe the chart isn't as scary as it makes it out to seem, or maybe she was interpreting this correctly in the past, because while it is a very steep increase and it is only just, from negative 0.4 to 1 degree Celsius, that doesn't sound like a lot. That amount of warming though can change the planet in extreme ways, which is why climate scientists for decades have predicted that we need to stay below that 2.5 degree Celsius threshold. Has the potential to change everything, raise our crops, from how we get drinking water, and so forth. And I have more advice for how to combat climate anxiety that you can check out right here.
But now look at this chart, which has a wider, longer y-axis. And as you can see, the temperature change over time is very insignificant because it's only one.
This one doesn't have a title, so that's misleading. This first chart that she's showing does not have a title, so we don't really understand what we're seeing here. We only get year and temperature, which we can make a pretty good analysis as to what this is showing. This first chart shows the annual mean, which is the annual average, and then the lowest smoothing. Look how easy it is to look stuff up when you don't know what it is. A non-parametric statistical method that fits a smooth curve to a scatter plot of data by using local weighted polynomial regression. I'm not very good at math. These are a bunch of math words, but basically what this is it's literally just a smooth line to better visualize change over time. Oh my God. She's using this chart to validate climate change is a myth. And guess what this chart is called? Central Park temperature range. Central Park, New York City. Not one state, not one city. One park. I get it, it's a big park. Because the temperature of Central Park has remained pretty steady over time. That means climate change is fake.
Wider, longer y-axis, and as you can see, the temperature change over time is very insignificant because it's only 1 degree of warming to manipulate us to be so scared that this change is so freaking crazy, when then the second chart makes it look like, okay, this is actually manageable.
I think that is a valid take right there. Again, I think it does come back to the media. They use these charts to make scary headlines and spread doom. We should be looking at these charts and say, oh, we can fix it, right? I think that is a much better attitude to have when we look at these charts and when we trust science. Every now and then, she has a very valid thing that she says.
Wildfires. This is the first chart. And you can see it's only going back a few decades. And it looks like, oh my gosh, we're having so many more wildfires a year. This is unprecedented. Now look at this chart. It goes back to the 1920s. And as you can see, back in the 1920s, there was a ton of wildfires as well. There was a ton of acreage burning. And I don't know why this happens. Is it because there's activists who are making these charts and they want to freak us out and scare us into action? That's what I think that it is. Let's just take the information that really backs up our point so people will be scared into action.
The data remains the same, but it looks manipulated. It appears different when the data is stretched out versus compressed. And it's just a visual thing. The data remains the same. The data is not being manipulated. It looks different depending on how much or how little you're looking at. Jesus Christ.
Day 25 of explaining why, as a former climate activist, I now think the climate movement is a scam. So I've talked about the media and how it manipulates the narrative, it causes alarmism, and I want to talk about scientists because they're also really incentivized to push the climate alarmism narrative. And specifically this article, go to the title, I left out the full truth to get my climate change paper published. The paper I just published, Climate Warming Increases Extreme Daily Wildfire Growth Risk in California, focuses exclusively on how climate change has affected extreme wildfire behavior. I knew not to try to quantify key aspects of other than climate change in my research because it would dilute the story that the prestigious journals like Nature and its rival Science want to tell. This matters because it's critically important for scientists to be published in high-profile journals.
This is valid, and people within the scientific community do have critiques of these two journals because they don't publish everybody. And they also typically, I think these two, if I'm thinking correctly, have a paywall, meaning that the average person can't just go read these journals, read these published papers if you don't have the funds.
What Patrick is saying in this article is that scientists are incentivized.
What Patrick is saying is that he personally made the choice to do this. One person. Again, is this a whistleblower situation that is exposing the scientific community? Absolutely, maybe. So it's hard to say, you know, did Patrick talk to every single climate scientist who's been published on every single one of these journals and ask them? Maybe he did. I kind of doubt it. There's no hard proof of this. I think it is something valid that needs to be looked into, absolutely, because if this is the case, then sure. This article was about forest fires in California. Absolutely, they are influenced by climate change, but they are also influenced poor forest mismanagement. They are also influenced now in 2025 by National Forest Service workers being fired and being detained by ICE while actively fighting fires. So there are other external forces. I don't know when this paper was published by Patrick. I don't know what years of data he was looking at, but those are some modern influences as to why forest fires are so bad in California in particular, but throughout the West.
Day 26 of explaining why, as a former climate activist, I now think the climate movement is a scam. One of my biggest issues with the climate movement is the hyper focus on carbon emissions. There's even this really good cartoon meme I'm gonna put over my face of
a cartoon meme where the second thing is
Day 26 of explaining
is overpopulation, eugenics. I'm gonna look at the rest of this meme. Water pollution, emissions. Air pollution, emissions. Habit destruction, carbon emissions. Biodiversity loss, carbon emissions. Extinction, carbon emissions. Widespread toxic pollution, carbon emissions. All these things on the top of this meme come down to carbon emissions. Why are environmentalists so focused on carbon emissions? Because that is the root. These other things are not the root problem. They are causes of the root problem. The problem is carbon emissions, and it is causing all of these other things to happen. And yeah, I care about biodiversity loss. I care about all of that. I care about water pollution, air pollution. How do I fix that? By cutting carbon emissions.
Where every single environmental disaster that happens, we now say climate change. So if there's flooding, it's climate change. If there's people starving in developing countries, it's climate change.
No, nobody is saying that 100% of the time. But guess what? Climate change does lead to famine. Climate change does lead to more rain. Climate change does lead to, which drought contributes to flooding because the ground gets so dry that it can't absorb enough water. And if all the plants are dead, there's no plants to also absorb that water, which leads to flooding.
And we've got to reduce our emissions. But the fact of the matter is reducing emissions takes so much time, so much investment. It takes decades to have.
We've had decades. It takes so much time and investment. Then take your time and take your investment and take your money and do it. We've known that this was a thing for decades. I just made a full video on the history of US climate policy starting in the 1960s, which you can check out right here. We have known easily since the 60s, way before that as well, but we solidly knew in the 60s that we needed to cut carbon emissions and we didn't. We have had 60 years to do this and we haven't. So yeah, it is kind of too late in the sense that we can't immediately right here, right now, stop all fossil fuel extraction, stop all fossil fuel refinery, boom, green energy. We can't do that. We should have done it 60 years ago.
We saw when the world shut down for COVID, our emissions barely moved and the entire world was shut down, right? But things like flooding or people starving in a developing country, those are problems that we can solve now with the technology that we have. You can create better flood walls.
Flood walls don't help. What we need is plants.
Create better pumping systems like we see in New Orleans. In places where not access to good food, having access to cheap energy in the form of fossil fuels would allow those regions to develop with commercial agriculture.
Fossil fuels can't stop a drought. Fossil fuels can't bring clean water into an area.
We can solve all these problems that we face, but we don't look at them in this practical, grounded, all right, what can we do to fix this issue? And we have this sort of
Who are you talking to right now? She just makes these assumptions. It's all assumptions.
Approach that's just lower carbon emissions. When lowering carbon emissions, sure, I'm for that if we want to do.
No, she's not, because she loves fossil fuels.
There are problems that we could fix today.
I don't think that we should rely on curbing carbon emissions to help feed people as the only solution. We can do more for species loss right now by not logging, removing invasive species, by planting native species. We can do stuff, and we are. People are all throughout the United States, all throughout the world, are doing stuff right now for all these little individual issues. But at the same time, we are also focusing on carbon emissions because it will prevent all of that from getting worse. She's just so disconnected. She truly just thinks that environmentalists only care about carbon emissions. And yeah, that probably is the case. And that is why it's important to be an intersectional environmentalist. Learn more right here. But again, who are you talking to? Was the last environmentalist you talked to Al Gore in 2001? Moving on.
Day 27 of explaining why, as a former climate activist, I now think the climate movement is a scam. I'm reading Bjorn Lomborg's book. called.
All right, who's this? Bjorn Lomborg, Danish political scientist and author. So he believes that climate change exists and that humans cause climate change, but he disputes that the effects and economic impacts will be negative. So that's an interesting take. So that's what we know about this guy that she's citing.
In 2019, Washington Post surveyed showed that American children ages 13 to 17, 57% feel afraid about climate change, 52% feel angry, and 42% feel guilty. In one study in 2012, Denver children were surveyed, ages 10 to 12. 82% expressed fear, sadness, and anger when discussing their feelings about the environment. What's so frustrating about this is we live in the most abundant and if you live in the West, the most abundant country, if you live in America, the most abundant country in the history of the world. These are children who are literally living in paradise. Like, they have...
What America are you living in? She posted this 2 months ago.
The world at their fingertips. They could grow up to be whatever they want to be. They are afraid that they are going to die from climate change, and they are not going to die from climate change. We can adapt to climate change. It's totally...
Yes, we can adapt to climate change by stopping it.
Challenge that as a civilization, I have full confidence in us that we can figure it out.
What gives you that false confidence that the United States can figure out not how to fix climate change, but how we can survive through it? I'm literally thinking of any major disaster in the United States. The LA fires, Hurricane Katrina, flooding that just happened in Texas, the hurricane that hit North Carolina last year. And like post Katrina, if you've not watched the documentary, the Nat Geo documentary on Hulu about Hurricane Katrina, so eye-opening. What happens post-disaster? Because of course we need stuff like the National Weather Service and NOAA to predict these events for us, and they're not because they're being defunded and the scientists are being fired because they're not pushing Trump's agenda, but also what happens post-disaster. Governors with the National Guard, with FEMA. It was a hot mess in 2005, and it's surely just going to get worse, and she really has faith that we can survive climate change. Not fix it, but survive it.
And so I just really hope, as I keep making this series, we need to get kids to stop being so afraid and teach them the full context within which they live. I sound like Kamala Harris. But they need to know the context within which they live, which is that they live in a hugely abundant time, and they're so blessed to be alive. And if they want to go into the environment and help conserve the environment and protect the planet, or whatever they want to do, that's awesome. They should do that, but it should come from a place of optimism and hope, and not from a place of fear and guilt.
I agree that like children shouldn't be feeling guilty for climate change. I think that's sad. I wish she would have cited her sources so that I could look at the numbers and the charts and whatever. But like if fear is what motivates you, if anxiety is what motivates you, if worry is what motivates you, fine. Let that motivate you to do some good. But yeah, if you're more of an optimist, the hope of a better future is what motivates you, by all means, that's fine. I don't think you should be the one saying like, children shouldn't feel anxiety, children shouldn't feel fear. Children can feel whatever they want. This was a weird one. These are all weird, but this was a really weird one.
Day 28 of explaining why, as a former climate activist, I now think the climate movement is a scam. I want to talk about climate anxiety because I had it for years.
I actually talked about this in my video about climate anxiety. I had a very similar story to her actually, in that I had climate anxiety for years. But I went, okay, climate change is not my fault, but I can still do a lot of good in the world and I can still make the planet a better place. And she said, climate change is not my fault. I'm gonna start drinking fossil fuels. That's what it feels like.
I could not picture it past 10 years out because I truly believed that the world was going to end. And the more that I now know about how important your mindset is and just what you visualize and how you carry yourself, it's powerful. You're blocking like your blessings, I feel like. If you're walking around with anxiety, not even like the fact that it's fearful, you're full of fear, you're unable to act, what does it do to your nervous system, your cortisol levels, to live with that kind of existential fear? Limits your ability to be like a productive, present person. And I went around with that in my 20s for a period of time until you kind of have to just ignore it and pretend it's not there. And then I, learned more about climate change and learned that I think it's adaptable and I think we can survive it, and we are already adapting to it.
I think that's such a weird thing to say under the Trump administration, that we are adapting to climate change. Historically, yeah, we were, sort of. I'm not here to praise any administration of the past. The Trump administration is doing everything in their power to make sure that nobody survives anything. They're quite frankly just trying to kill us in so many different ways, but like defunding the National Weather Service. That's not adapting to climate change. That's going to kill people. Defunding climate science, same thing. Defunding science in general. Defunding the CDC. Firing people who make vaccines. Making it so that you can't just walk in and get a vaccine anymore. RFK just did that. And what does that have to do with climate change? Disease gets worse as the planet warms. We're not adapting anymore.
Middle school age, high school age, college age kids who are being taught climate change in schools, or they're watching it from the media and they're learning about it in such a way that they think the world is going to end.
Has she read a school curriculum? Has she talked to these children? I'm gonna say no, because she hasn't talked to any climate activists. She hasn't talked to any climate scientists either. And then she just makes makes assumptions.
Young people should be growing up feeling they can be hopeful, optimistic.
They should, absolutely. I totally agree. Young people should be happy and optimistic, but they can't when their future is at risk. Here to say also, their future is gonna end. They're not gonna have a future. I'm not saying that. I'm a climate optimist. It's weird that we're both climate optimists, but like, I think that we can. We have the potential to stop climate change. We have the potential to curb emissions. We have the potential to live a prosperous life as a human species. You can be optimistic while still being taught the facts of climate change. And it sounds like she just doesn't want people to be taught the facts of climate change.
They can solve problems. They can grow up to be whatever they want to be, or go into some practical job to pay the bills, whatever they want to be, especially when you live in America where there is so much opportunity. The fact that our schools are teaching young people to be afraid about the
So much opportunity. So much. Nobody's hiring. Can't afford a house. I'm going into science knowing full well that science is being defunded and I might not have a job when I graduate. I had a friend, a park ranger, lose their job this spring. Firefighters are getting detained by ICE right now. Land of opportunity. For what, the rich white kids?
So it's taken me 5 years to speak out against what I saw were the issues of the climate movement. I haven't been posting on my Instagram yet, any of my stuff that I'm posting here because I'm too afraid of the backlash. And I'm just thinking about this because I think my account is like gonna get banned because I keep getting strikes, but like I'm so afraid to enter the environment on my Instagram because it's all these people that either I know in my real life or like influencers that I used to work with, and it's just like so much incoming. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that I feel like it's so hard to speak out against something when there is such a big movement, and I feel like there's gotta be so many protesters. Like I would love to hear from like the people who are the pro-Palestine protesters on college campuses. I wonder if any of them who were protesting like a year ago have changed their minds, because it's so scary to go up against a movement once you change your minds. And it took me 5 years to feel confident enough in my perspective and to trust myself and build myself up from the inside to live in my truth and to just say, okay, I'm gonna get backlash for what I say about the climate movement. I'm willing to take that on because I know in my heart and from the research that I've done that this is what I want to speak about. I think this meme is a mental virus that has infected all of us. This is the everything's fine meme. Oh, we live in late stage capitalism and the world is actually so bad, guys. Our lives are so bad. It's not true. And it really bothers me because I feel like people in America, I know people like this, young people, they think the world is awful. And I used to be like this, my time it's not that bad, like chill. Okay, with the help of my girl, ChatGPT, I got some stats and how the world's improved.
Ugh! I didn't think she could get worse. She just used ChatGPT as a source. Oh my god. Okay, I'm not even gonna watch this one. That's extremely annoying. Day 29.
Day 29 of explaining why, as a former climate activist, I now think the climate movement is a scam. When I was a climate activist, I was tricked into thinking that everything that was a blessing in my life was actually a curse and something that I should feel guilty for.
Girl, that's your fault. That's your problem. That does not make the climate movement a scam.
Let me give you an example of this in the form of plastic. So I used to be very against single-use plastic. I would do Plastic-Free July every year. And one year I was doing it, and my sister-in-law had a newborn baby. So I'm like making some video about not using single-use plastic, like not using water bottles, whatever. And she comes into the kitchen and she's taking out her milk, her breast milk that was frozen in little plastic bags. I had this little moment where I am like making a video about how plastic is so evil, and then I'm looking at my sister-in-law who uses single-use plastic, and it empowers her to feed her baby. Just a little moment there, I thought plastic actually is a technology that empowers women so much, whether it's the
Her arguments always come down to some watered down version of feminism. And it's so weird. Like, she loves to say fossil fuels are good for feminism. Meanwhile, women are actually at the biggest risk of dying from climate change.
way that it preserves food, frozen food, so you can give your kids a good meal after work because we're working, the way it's used for medical.
Consistently, always so close to the point. We're working too much, so therefore we need plastic to feed our kids. What if we don't work so much?
And single-use plastic, the disposable kind that's only used once and thrown out, is very helpful. There's a way to look at it and say, yes, obviously we don't want to overuse it. We don't want it polluting our rivers and oceans and things like that. But also, be so grateful that we live in a time where we have...
This was a very common theme from the first part of my video reacting to her, and that she just loves to use these old memories of, you know, the climate movement 10 years ago demonized all forms of plastic. So therefore, the climate movement is a scam, and the climate movement has not progressed since that. No! Everyone I know in the climate movement right here, right now, uses plastic. Because one, we have to. We only have access to what we have access to. And if what I have access to is plastic, I gotta use it. As well as, we all recognize the benefits of plastic. That does not mean that we think plastic is good, right? But we understand that, like, medical stuff, pills, gloves, single-use needles, help stop the spread of disease. And other stuff too, like when it comes to breast milk or menstrual products, there are plenty of reasons why someone might use plastic, and it is a good thing for hygiene and for survival. But that does not mean that we should be over-consuming unnecessary plastic. We should be doing absolutely everything that we can to reduce as much plastic as we can. But for that plastic that is necessary to your life, don't sweat it. If it is necessary to your life, use it. But if it's not necessary to your life, try finding something else. If you don't need a disposable water bottle, try a reusable. Let's move on to day 30.
So if you just consume the normal climate narrative that all of us do through the media, social media, etc., the narrative is that the world is becoming so unsafe because of carbon emissions and climate change. And it's implied that we're going to get to a place where the planet will be unlivable because of our human actions. But the reality does not bear this out. And if you just look at the stats of deaths from climate disasters, they have completely gone down.
It's gonna be the same effing chart that we just talked about, isn't it?
Of this
Yes! She's so predictable. I knew she was going to use the same exact effing chart. I want to curse so bad. I'm keeping it family friendly. Let's see what she has to say.
Alex Epstein right here, which shows that we see CO2 going up, but climate deaths are going down. And the reason why is because we have modern infrastructure that allows us to prepare and prevent worse disasters from happening. So by the way we build our buildings, by flood walls.
Keep in mind, this data is only showing climate-related disaster deaths, which is also important because the same author, keep in mind, does not believe that climate change is causing disasters. This is only accounting for fires, floods, hurricanes, droughts, famine, if they even include all of that stuff. But what it is not including is that the literal emissions of fossil fuels also kill people. It gives people upper respiratory disease. It gives people cancer. Fossil fuels are killing people in other ways besides just disasters. Let's keep going.
By just being able to evacuate during a storm, modern communication, we know storms are coming. All of those things have made us so much more safe from climate disasters. It begs to question, even if climate change is happening, but the thing that's causing climate change, which in this case is fossil fuels, makes us safer from it. If we just did a natural cost benefit analysis, couldn't we argue that just using fossil fuels and continuing to use them is just a smart solution because they're what protects us from the climate warming in the first place? This is just food for thought. I want to know what you think.
No, that's not the first place. She's saying that being able to get in your car and drive away from a hurricane and drive away from a fire is what protects you from climate change in the first place. That's your last resort, babes. Getting out of there, evacuating is your last resort. Why am I speaking like Trump right now? Your first line of defense against climate change is maybe no climate change? She's literally saying we should keep driving our gasoline-powered cars to keep fueling climate change, which apparently she acknowledges is human-made. We should keep increasing climate change because our gasoline cars are getting us away from disasters. Can she not understand that how that cycle is just so vicious and never ending? We can't get off that wheel. We can't. We can if we curb emissions, right? And now the wheel's broken. And then we don't need to drive away from disasters if there's no disasters. She's thinking of this in the reverse. She's thinking that because there's disasters, we need fossil fuels to drive away from them. But if there's no disasters, there's nothing to drive away from. This one might be worse than the plants. The last one I reacted to her, and she said CO2 was good for plants. So therefore we should pollute even more. Insane. These are insane things to say.
Because I think this cost-benefit analysis is completely not acknowledged in the climate movement, and we only look at the worst impacts.
We do need the full picture. We do need nuance, but she's not giving us nuance. She's giving us the slice of the pie that she likes. She's also not looking at the full picture. She's picking a different slice of the pie and calling it the whole pie.
I don't have climate anxiety anymore. It's because I know because of modern infrastructure and our access to
your access. What a privileged take. Let me play that back.
Reality that we live in and not just the worst aspects of it. And why I don't have climate anxiety anymore is because I know because of modern infrastructure and our access to cheap abundant energy, we can survive climate change even as we see the impacts from it.
Can an EV, can a train not get you out of a disaster zone? Number 2, he's after me because I'm his kind of sister. I'm crashing out. Number 2, what a privileged freaking take. What a privileged take. I don't have climate anxiety anymore because I'm wealthy enough to afford a car. I don't have to fear for climate anxiety anymore because I am wealthy enough to put gas in that car. I do not fear for climate anxiety because I am wealthy enough to evacuate and be able to go get a hotel. Or I am privileged enough to have family in another state who would take me in. Because I can personally survive climate change because I am wealthy enough and I am privileged enough, and she hates that word, but it is just so true. That is what is applying to her. It is privilege. Because I am privileged enough, I don't have climate anxiety, and therefore nobody should have climate anxiety, and therefore we're all fine. Because of my specific situation that I am living in, it should apply to everybody else. No. You really need to understand that people in these disaster zones might not have a car. This was iterated very heavily in that Hurricane Katrina documentary, in that plenty of people did have cars. So many people were so poor that they could not afford to put gas in that car. Because that is just the reality of so many people in the United States living below the poverty line. They cannot evacuate. Therefore, they're probably going to fear more for climate change than you. And yeah, perhaps, honestly, this also aided in my climate anxiety relief because I know that I'm in a position in her. I have money. I have a car. I can probably evacuate and be just fine if an emergency were to hit. Good for me. This is where we differ. Is she says, good for me, I don't have climate anxiety. Nobody should have climate anxiety because we have fossil fuels and we have car and we have money and we have abundance. Good for you. I'm glad you have abundance. Me too. I'm perfectly aware of my situation and that I'm in a privileged position to have money and a car and fuel in my car. But I still acknowledge that is not the case for everybody. And this is what she hates about the climate movement, right? She talks about this in her last one that I reacted to. She didn't fully say she hates intersectionality, but based off of context clues, she just might not know that word. She hates intersectionality. She hates that climate activists make these connections between poverty, between race, between gender, between sexuality, between all these other forms of oppression and how they are all related. Climate change related oppression, climate change related death. This is a conspiracy. This just popped up in my head. I wonder if Republicans don't care about climate change because of eugenics. That's something to explore another day. Oh my gosh, she continues. 31, 32, 33. Oh, there's only 3 more. She posts so many videos. That is enough for today. In conclusion, it is astounding to me that Lucy and I have very similar critiques of the climate movement. In the last videos that I reacted to, she had these critiques about bioplastic. I have the same critiques. She had the same critiques about, going fully plastic free. But it is so interesting how differently we have diverged after that. Other people have picked up on it in her comments as well, and that she has really fallen down the alt-right pipeline. I just want every human to prosper. That's it. I want everybody to have access to basic human rights. It all comes back to that eco to alt-right pipeline video. Like, it's a Venn diagram that is almost a circle. Like, what do you mean? We believe on so many of the same things, me and Lucy, but we're so different. Anyway, these videos are fun yet frustrating. I hope that these provide you with some information on how you can combat climate deniers in your life or in social media. My best piece of advice is to not engage, especially if you're only going to engage to hate. If you're going to engage, like I want to hopefully spark a conversation or at least get her to cite her sources, at least get her to be more responsible about what she's talking about online. I know that's a really big ask, but like if you're going to go to her page just to comment slurs, death threats, bullying, harassment, don't do that because 1, it's still giving her views, it's still giving her comments. 2, nobody deserves that. I don't care how wrong she is. Nobody deserves to be treated like that, right? If you want to go to her page and block her, go for it. If you want to go to her page and also try to engage in a conversation, go for it. Please do not go to her page and be mean. I don't think anybody in this community that I've built would do that, but I just want to put that out there. And yes, please don't engage. Please don't comment nonsense on her videos. Please don't like them. Please don't share them. I only brought up her name in this video because I was aware of so many people that I know who still follow her from when she was in her climate activist days. And I'm hoping that these people unfollow her, block her, spread the word. This is a person who should not be trusted. She is spreading climate misinformation and disinformation. Maybe I'll react to more of her videos. If you like this video, let me know. If you like me reacting to her in particular, let me know. Or maybe I should find a different climate denier for the next part of this series. If I should make this a series, let me know. This was me procrastinating my math homework. So fun time, but man, I need to go touch some grass. I said the same thing after the last video. I need to go touch some grass after watching her videos. I'll see you in the next video, but until then, remember that your small actions make a big difference in the long run. Bye guys.